the British Journal of Addiction by Doctor John Yerbury Dent, as shared by Demi Shaftraven. I hope I got your name correctly pronounced there, Demi, or Demi Shaftraven. He has acquired the original documents from J. Warwick Sweeney, who is Dr. John Yerbury Dent's grandson or great-grandson, or William S Burroughs. I promise I will not do William Burroughs impersonations today. Paul Tone, as in Foldhead, has recommended a couple of tracks. I'm looking at this through a magnifying glass. I don't have the right technology that probably all you other people have. Anyway, the British Journal of Addiction. To alcohol and other drugs, formerly the British Journal of Inebriety. Okay, Bill. Here is good news for the readers of this journal. Dr. Bett will soon be taking over the editorship. To have our journal produced by an expert will immensely raise our prestige in the world. To realize how lucky we are, we have only to look at his medical... can't read that word. His medical something, that excellent magazine, which is already a necessity and a pleasure for the harassed GP. The first number of this appeared in January of last year. So last year would have been 1956, because this is written in January 1957. He has been our most successful president in collecting the right speakers and papers for our meetings. He will collect equally important material for our journal, and he will introduce it to us with his inimitable grace and felicity. The medical profession has beaten the government's proposed ban on the legal production of heroin. Now it is the turn for the government to beat the profession and induce it to prescribe less of the addictive drugs, especially the barbiturates. Doctors must learn that an aesthetic is not a hypnotic. Dulling the cerebrum is not the same as producing sleep. Sleep is an activity of the hypothalamus. We can be responsive to very slight stimuli if they are important to us when we are soundly asleep. For example, the whiff of burning or the changed breathing of a sick baby may have more impact on us when asleep than when we are awake and distracted by 100 unimportant batterings, and sedatives may even murder sleep. We doctors, like everybody else, are hypnotized by words. This is very dangerous when we call stupefiers hypnotics, for we begin to believe they really are real sleep producers. I was addicted to Zopiclone for 15 fucking years. So this is from... from the British Journal of Addiction, page 129. August the 3rd, 1954, Venice. It's titled, in capitals, Letter from a Master Addict to Dangerous Drugs. No, I will not do William Burroughs impersonations today. Letter from a Master Addict to Dangerous Drugs. Letter from a Master Addict to dangerous drugs. Dear Doctor, thanks for your letter. I enclose that article on the effects of various drugs I have used. I do not know if it is suitable for your publication. I have no objection to my name being used. No difficulty with drinking, no desire to take any drug. General health, excellent. Please give my regards to Mr. I use his system of exercises daily with excellent results. I have been thinking of writing a book on narcotic drugs if I can find a suitable collaborator to handle the technical end. Yours, William Burroughs. The use of opium and opium derivatives leads to a state that defines limits and describes addiction. The term is loosely used to indicate anything one is used to or wants. We speak of addiction to candy, coffee, tobacco, warm weather, television, detective stories, crossword puzzles. So misapplied, the term loses any useful precision of meaning. The use of morphine leads to a metabolic dependence on morphine. Morphine becomes a biologic need, like water, and the user may die if he is suddenly deprived of it. The diabetic will die without insulin, but he is not addicted to insulin. He needs insulin to maintain a normal metabolism. The addict needs morphine to maintain a morphine metabolism and so avoid the excruciatingly painful return to a normal metabolism. I have used a number of narcotic drugs over a period of 20 years. Some of these drugs are addicting in the above sense. Most are not. I have used a number of narcotic drugs over a period of 40 years. Some of those drugs were addicting, most were not. Opiates. Over a period of 12 years, I have used opium, smoked and taken orally. Injection in the skin causes abscesses. Injection in the vein is unpleasant and perhaps dangerous. Heroin injected in skin, vein, muscle, sniffed when no needle was available. Morphine, Dilaudid, Pantopon, Eucadol, Paracodeine, Dianine, Codeine, Demerol, Methadone. They are all habit-forming in varying degrees. Nor does it make much difference how the drug is administered. Smoked, sniffed, injected, taken orally, inserted in rectal suppositories, the end result will be the same: addiction. And a smoking habit is as difficult to break as an intravenous injection habit. The concept that injection habits are particularly injurious derives from an irrational fear of needles. Injections poison the bloodstream, as though the bloodstream were any less poisoned by substances absorbed from the stomach, the lungs, or the mucous membrane. Demerol is probably less addicting than morphine. It is also less satisfying to the addict and less effective as a painkiller. While a Demerol habit is easier to break than a morphine habit, Demerol is certainly more injurious to the health and specifically to the nervous system. I once used Demerol for 3 months and developed a number of distressing symptoms. Trembling hands. With morphine, my hands are always steady. Progressive loss of coordination, muscular contractions, paranoid obsessions, fear of insanity. Finally, I contracted an opportune intolerance for Demerol, no doubt a measure of self-preservation, and switched to methadone. Immediately all my symptoms disappeared. I may add that Demerol is quite as constipating as morphine, that it exerts an even more depressing effect on the appetite and the sexual functions. Does not, however, contract the pupils. I have given myself thousands of injections over a period of years with unsterilized, in fact, dirty needles, and never sustained an infection until I used Demerol. Then I came down with a series of abscesses, one of which had to be lanced and drained. In short, Demerol seems to me a more dangerous drug than morphine. Methadone is completely satisfying to the addict, an excellent painkiller, at least as addicting as morphine. I have taken morphine for acute pain. Any opiate that effectively relieves pain to an equal degree relieves withdrawal symptoms. The conclusion is obvious. Any opiate that relieves pain is habit-forming, and the more effectively it relieves pain, the more habit-forming it is. The habit-forming molecule and the pain-killing molecule of morphine are probably identical, and the process by which morphine relieves pain is the same process that leads to tolerance and addiction. Non-habit-forming morphine appears to be a latter-day philosopher's stone. On the other hand, variations of apomorphine may prove extremely effective in controlling the withdrawal syndrome, but we should not expect this drug to be a painkiller as well. Phenomena of morphine addiction are well known, and there is no reason to go over them here. A few points, it seems to me, have received insufficient attention. The metabolic incompatibility between morphine and alcohol has been observed, but no one, so far as I know, has advanced an explanation. If a morphine addict drinks alcohol, he experiences no agreeable or euphoric sensations. There is a feeling of slowly mounting discomfort and the need for another injection. The alcohol seems to be short-circuited, perhaps by the liver. I once attempted to drink in a state of incomplete recovery from an attack of jaundice. I was not using morphine at this time. The metabolic sensation was identical. In one case, the liver was partly out of action from jaundice. In the other, preoccupied, literally, by a morphine metabolism. In neither case could it metabolize alcohol. If an alcoholic becomes addicted to morphine invariably and completely displaces alcohol. I have known several alcoholics who began using morphine. They were able to tolerate large doses of morphine immediately, 1 grain to a shot, without ill effects, and in a matter of days stopped taking alcohol. The reverse never occurs. The morphine addict cannot tolerate alcohol when he is using morphine or suffering from morphine withdrawal. The ability to tolerate alcohol is a sure sign of disintoxication. In consequence, alcohol can never be substituted for morphine directly. Of course, a disintoxicated addict may start drinking and become an alcoholic. So fucking right. During withdrawal, the addict is acutely aware of his surroundings. Sense impressions are sharpened to the point of hallucination. Familiar objects seem to stir with a writhing, furtive life. The addict is subject to a barrage of sensations, external and visceral. He may experience flashes of beauty and nostalgia, but the overall impression is extremely painful. Possibly his sensations are painful because of their intensity. A pleasurable sensation may become intolerable after a certain intensity is reached. I have noticed 2 special reactions of early withdrawal. 1. Everything looks threatening. 2. Mild paranoia. Doctors and nurses appear as monsters of evil. In the course of several cures, I have felt myself surrounded by dangerous lunatics. I talked with one of Dr. Dent's patients who had just undergone disintoxication for a pethidine habit. He reported an identical experience. He told me that for 24 hours the nurses and the doctor seemed brutal and repugnant, and everything looked blue. And I have talked with other addicts who experienced the same reactions. Now, the psychological basis for paranoid notions during withdrawal is obvious. The specific similarity of these reactions indicates a common metabolic origin. The similarity between withdrawal phenomena and certain states of drug intoxication is striking. Hashish, Banisteriopsis caapi, harmaline, peyote, mescaline produce states of acute sensitivity with hallucinatory viewpoint. Everything looks alive. Paranoid ideas are frequent. Banisteriopsis caapi intoxication specifically reproduces the state of withdrawal. Everything looks threatening. Paranoid ideas are marked, especially with overdose. After taking Banisteriopsis caapi, I was convinced that the medicine man and his apprentice were conspiring to murder me. It seems that metabolic states of the body can reproduce the effects of various drugs. In the USA, heroin addicts are receiving an involuntary reduction cure from the pushers who progressively dilute their wares with milk sugar and barbiturates. As a result, many of the addicts who seek treatment are lightly addicted, so they can be completely disintoxicated in a short time, 7 to 8 days. They recover rapidly without medication. Meanwhile, any tranquilizing, anti-allergic or sedative drug will afford some relief, especially if injected. The addict feels better. The addict feels better if he knows that some alien substance is coursing through his bloodstream. Talserol, thorazine, and related tranquilizers. Every variety of barbiturate, chloral hydrate and paraldehyde, antihistamines, cortisone, reserpine, even shock. Can lobotomy be far behind? Have all been used with results usually described as encouraging. My own experience suggests that these results be accepted with some reserve. Of course, symptomatic treatment is indicated, and all these drugs, with possible exception of the drug most commonly used, barbiturates, have a place in the treatment of the withdrawal syndrome, but none of these drugs is in itself the answer to withdrawal. Withdrawal symptoms vary with individual metabolism and physical type. Pigeon-chested, hay fever, and asthma-liable individuals suffer greatly from allergic symptoms during withdrawal. Running nose, sneezing, smarting, watering eyes, difficulty in breathing. In such cases, cortisone and antihistamine drugs may afford definite relief. Vomiting could probably be controlled with anti-nausea drugs like thorazine. I have undergone 10 cures, in the course of which all these drugs were used. I have taken quick reductions, slow reductions, prolonged sleep, apomorphine, antihistamines, a French system involving a worthless product known as amorphine, everything but shock. I would be interested to hear results of further experiments with shock treatment on somebody else. The success of any treatment depends on the degree and duration of addiction, the stage of withdrawal. Drugs which are effective in late or light withdrawal can be disastrous in the acute phase. Individual symptoms, health, age, etc. A method of treatment might be completely ineffective at one time, but give excellent results at another. Or a treatment that does me no good may help somebody else. I do not presume to pass any final judgments, only to report my own reactions to various drugs and methods of treatment. Reduction cures. This is the commonest form of treatment, and no method yet discovered can entirely replace it in cases of severe addiction. The patient must have some Morphine. If there is one rule that applies to all cases of addiction, this is it. But the morphine should be withdrawn as quickly as possible. I have taken slow reduction cures, and in every case the result was discouragement and eventual relapse. Imperceptible reduction is likely to be endless reduction. When the addict seeks cure, he has in most cases already experienced withdrawal symptoms many times. He expects an unpleasant ordeal, and he is prepared to endure it. But if the pain of withdrawal is to spread over 2 months instead of 10 days, he may not be able to endure it. It is not the intensity, but the duration of pain that breaks the will to resist. If the addict habitually takes any quantity, however small, of any opiate to relieve the weakness, insomnia, boredom, restlessness of late withdrawal, the withdrawal symptoms will be prolonged indefinitely, and complete relapse is almost certain. Prolonged sleep. Prolonged sleep. The theory sounds good. You go to sleep and wake up cured. You go to sleep and wake up cured. Industrial doses of chloral hydrate, barbiturates, thorazine only produced a nightmare state of semi-consciousness. Withdrawal of sedation after 5 days occasioned a severe shock. Symptoms of acute morphine deprivation supervened. The end result was a combined syndrome of unparalleled horror. No cure I ever took was as painful as this allegedly painless method. The cycle of sleep and wakefulness is always deeply disturbed during withdrawal. To further disturb it with massive sedation seems contraindicated, to say the least. Withdrawal of morphine is sufficiently traumatic without adding to it withdrawal of barbiturates. After 2 weeks in the hospital, 5 days sedation, 10 days rest. I was still so weak that I fainted when I tried to walk up a slight incline. I consider prolonged sleep the worst possible method of treating withdrawal. Antihistamines. Antihistamines. The use of antihistamines is based on the allergic theory of withdrawal. Sudden withdrawal of morphine precipitates an overproduction of histamine, with consequent allergic symptoms. In shock resulting from traumatic injury with acute pain, large quantities of histamine are released in the blood. In acute pain, as in addiction, toxic doses of morphine are readily tolerated. Rabbits, who have a high histamine content in the blood, are extremely resistant to morphine. Maybe I'm a rabbit. My own experience with antihistamines has not been conclusive. I once took a cure in which only antihistamines were used, and the results were good. But I was lightly addicted at that time, and had been without morphine for 72 hours when the cure started. I have frequently used antihistamines since then for withdrawal symptoms, with disappointing results. In fact, they seem to increase my depression and irritability. I do not suffer from typical allergic symptoms. Apomorphine. Apomorphine is certainly the best method of treating withdrawal that I have experienced. It does not completely eliminate the withdrawal symptoms, but reduces them to an endurable level. The acute symptoms such as stomach and leg cramps, convulsive or manic states are completely controlled. In fact, apomorphine treatment involves less discomfort than a reduction cure. Recovery is more rapid and more complete. Perhaps the psychological craving for morphine that persists after a cure is not psychological at all, but metabolic. More potent variations of the apomorphine formula might prove qualitatively more effective in treating all forms of addiction. Cortisone seems to give some relief, especially when injected intravenously. Thorazine provides some relief from withdrawal symptoms, but not much. Side effects of depression, disturbances of vision, indigestion offset dubious benefits. Reserpine. I never noticed any effect whatever from this drug, except a slight depression. Solserol. Negligible results. Barbiturates. It is common practice to prescribe barbiturates for the insomnia of withdrawal. Actually, the use of barbiturates delays the return of normal sleep, prolongs the whole period of withdrawal, and may lead to relapse. The addict is tempted to take a little codeine or paregoric with his Nembutal, very small quantities of opiates that would be quite innocuous for a normal person, immediately re-establish addiction in a cured addict. My experience certainly confirms Dr. Dent's statement that barbiturates are contraindicated. Chloral hydrate and paraldehyde. Probably preferable to barbiturates if a sedative is necessary, but most addicts will vomit up paraldehyde at once. I have also tried, on my own initiative, the following drugs during withdrawal. Alcohol. Absolutely contraindicated at any stage of withdrawal. The use of alcohol invariably exacerbates the withdrawal symptoms and leads to relapse. Alcohol can only be tolerated after metabolism returns to normal. This usually takes 1 month in cases of severe addiction. Benzedrine may relieve temporarily the depression of late withdrawal, disastrous during acute withdrawal, contraindicated at any stage because it produces a state of nervousness for which morphine is the physiological answer. Cocaine. The above goes double for cocaine. Cannabis indica, marijuana. In late or light withdrawal, relieves depression and increases the appetite. In acute withdrawal, an unmitigated disaster. I once smoked marijuana during early withdrawal and with nightmarish results. Cannabis is a sensitizer. If you feel bad already, it will make you feel worse. Contraindicated. Peyote. Banisteriopsis carpi. I have not ventured to experiment. The thought of Banisteriopsis intoxication superimposed on acute withdrawal makes the brain reel. I know of a man who substituted peyote during late withdrawal, claimed to lose all desire for morphine, ultimately died of peyote poisoning. In cases of severe addiction, definite physical withdrawal symptoms persist for 1 month at least. I have never seen or heard of a psychotic morphine addict. I mean anyone who showed psychotic symptoms while addicted to an opiate. In fact, addicts are drearily sane. Perhaps there is a metabolic incompatibility between schizophrenia and opiate addiction. On the other hand, the withdrawal of morphine often precipitates psychotic reactions, usually mild paranoia. Interesting that drugs and methods of treatment that give results in schizophrenia are also of some use in withdrawal. Antihistamines, tranquilizers, apomorphine, shock. Sir Charles Sherrington defines pain as the psychic adjunct of an imperative protective reflex. The vegetative nervous system expands and contracts in response to visceral rhythms and external stimuli, expanding to stimuli which are experienced as pleasurable. Sex, food, agreeable social contacts, etc. Contracting from pain, anxiety, fear, discomfort, boredom. Morphine alters the whole cycle of expansion and contraction, release and tension. The sexual function is deactivated, peristalsis inhibited. The pupils cease to react in response to light and darkness. The organism neither contracts from pain nor expands to normal sources of pleasure. It adjusts to a morphine cycle. The addict is immune to boredom. He can look at his shoe for hours or simply stay in bed. He needs no sexual outlet, no social contacts, no work, no diversion, no exercise. Nothing but morphine. Morphine may relieve pain by imparting to the organism some of the qualities of a plant. Pain could have no function for plants, which are, for the most part, stationary, incapable of protective reflexes. Scientists look for a non-habit-forming morphine that will kill pain without giving pleasure. Addicts want, or think they want, euphoria without addiction. I do not see how the functions of morphine can be separated. I think that any effective painkiller will depress the sexual function, induce euphoria, and cause addiction. The perfect painkiller would probably be immediately habit-forming. Bracket, if anyone is interested to develop such a drug, dihydroxyheroin might be a good place to start. The addict exists in a painless, sexless, timeless state. Transition back to the rhythms of animal life involves the withdrawal syndrome. I doubt if this transition can ever be made in comfort. Painless withdrawal can only be approached. Cocaine. Cocaine is the most exhilarating drug I have ever used. The euphoria centers in the head. Perhaps the drug activates pleasure connections directly in the brain. I suspect that an electric current in the right place would produce the same effect. The full exhilaration of cocaine can only be realized by an intravenous injection. The pleasurable effects do not last more than 5 or 10 minutes. If the drug is injected in the skin, rapid elimination vitiates the effects. This goes doubly for sniffing. It is standard practice for cocaine users to sit up all night shooting cocaine at 1-minute intervals, alternating with shots of heroin, or cocaine and heroin mixed in the same injection to form a speedball. I have never known an habitual cocaine user who was not a morphine addict. The desire for cocaine can be intense. I have spent whole days walking from one drugstore to another to fill a cocaine prescription. You may want cocaine intensely, but you don't have any metabolic need for it. If you can't get cocaine, you eat, you go to sleep, and forget it. I have talked with people who used cocaine for years. then were suddenly cut off from their supply. None of them experienced any withdrawal symptoms. Indeed, it is difficult to see how a front brain stimulant could be addicting. Addiction seems to be a monopoly of sedatives. Continued use of cocaine leads to nervousness, depression, sometimes drug psychosis, and paranoid hallucinations. The nervousness and depression resulting from cocaine use are not alleviated by more cocaine. They are effectively relieved by morphine. The use of cocaine by a morphine addict always leads to larger and more frequent injections of morphine. Cannabis indica, hashish, or marijuana. The effects of this drug have been frequently and luridly described. Disturbance of space-time perception, acute sensitivity to impressions, flight of ideas, laughing jacks, silliness. Marijuana is a sensitizer, and the results are not always pleasant. It makes a bad situation worse. Depression becomes despair. Anxiety, panic. I have already mentioned my horrible experience with marijuana during acute morphine withdrawal. I once gave marijuana to a guest who was mildly anxious about something, on bum kicks, as he put it. After smoking half a cigarette, he suddenly leapt to his feet, screaming, "I got the fear," and rushed out of the house. An especially unnerving feature of marijuana intoxication is a disturbance of the affective orientation. You do not know whether you like something or not, whether a sensation is pleasant or unpleasant. The use of marijuana varies greatly with the individual. Some smoke it constantly, some occasionally. Not a few dislike it intensely. It seems to be especially unpopular with confirmed morphine addicts, many of whom take a puritanical view of marijuana smoking. The ill effects of marijuana have been grossly exaggerated in the U.S. Our national drug is alcohol. We tend to regard the use of any other drug with special horror. Anyone given over to these alien vices deserves the complete ruin of his mind and body. People believe what they want to believe without regard for the facts. Marijuana is not habit-forming. I have never seen evidence of any ill effects from moderate use. Drug psychosis may result from prolonged and excessive use. Barbiturates. The barbiturates are definitely addicting if taken in large quantities over any period of time. About a gram a day will cause addiction. Withdrawal syndrome is more dangerous than morphine withdrawal, consisting of hallucinations with epilepsy-type convulsions. Addicts often injure themselves flopping about on concrete floors. Concrete floors being a usual corollary of abrupt withdrawal. Morphine addicts often take barbiturates to potentiate inadequate morphine rations. Some of them become barbiturate addicts as well, yes. I once took 2 Nembutal capsules, 1.5 grain each, every night for 4 months and suffered no withdrawal symptoms. Barbiturate addiction is a question of quantity. It is probably not a metabolic addiction like morphine, but a mechanical reaction from excessive front brain sedation. The barbiturate addict presents a shocking spectacle. He cannot coordinate. He staggers, falls off bar stools, goes to sleep in the middle of a sentence, drops food out of his mouth. He is confused, quarrelsome, and stupid, and he almost always uses other drugs. Anything he can lay his hands on: alcohol, benzodrine, opiates, marijuana. Barbiturate users are looked down on in addict society. Goofball gums. You got no class to them. The next step down is coal gas in milk or sniffing ammonia in a bucket. Scrub woman's kick. It seems to me that barbiturates cause the worst possible form of addiction. Unsightly, deteriorating, difficult to treat. Benzodrine. This is a cerebral stimulant like cocaine. Large doses cause prolonged sleeplessness with feelings of exhilaration. The period of euphoria is followed by a horrible depression. The drug tends to increase anxiety. It causes indigestion and loss of appetite. I know of only one case where definite symptoms followed the withdrawal of benzodrine. This was a woman of my acquaintance who used incredible quantities of benzodrine for 6 months. During this period, she developed a drug psychosis and was hospitalized for 10 days. She continued the use of benzodrine but was suddenly cut off. She suffered an asthma-type seizure. She could not get her breath and turned blue. I gave her a dose of antihistamine, thephorin, which afforded immediate relief. The symptoms did not return. Peyote. Mescaline. This is undoubtedly a stimulant. It dilates the pupils, keeps one awake. Peyote is extremely nauseating. Users experience difficulty keeping it down long enough to realize the effect, which is similar in some respects to marijuana. There is increased sensitivity to impression, especially to colors. Peyote intoxication causes a peculiar vegetable consciousness or identification with the plant. Everything looks like a peyote plant. It is easy to understand why the Indians believe there is a resident spirit in the peyote cactus. Overdose of peyote may lead to respiratory paralysis and death. I know of one case. There is no reason to believe that peyote is addicting. Banisteriopsis carpi. Hermeline, banisterine, telepathine. Banisteriopsis carpi is a fast-growing vine. The active principle is apparently found throughout the wood of the fresh-cut vine. The inner bark is considered most active and the leaves are never used. It takes a considerable quantity of the vine to feel the full effects of the drug. About 5 pieces of vine, each 8 inches long, are needed for one person. The vine is crushed and boiled for 2 or more hours with the leaves of a bush identified as Palicuria fam rubicae, yache, or ayahuasca. The most commonly used Indian names for Banisteriopsis carpi is an hallucinating narcotic that produces a profound derangement of the senses. In overdose, it is a convulsant poison. The antidote is a barbiturate or other strong anticonvulsant sedative. Anyone taking yahe for the first time should have a sedative ready in the event of an overdose. The hallucinating properties of yahe have led to its use by medicine men to potentiate their powers. They also use it as a cure-all in the treatment of various illnesses. Yahe lowers the body temperature and consequently is of some use in the treatment of fever. It is a powerful antihelminthic indicated for treatment of stomach or intestinal worms. Yahe induces a state of conscious anesthesia and is used in rites where the initiates must undergo a painful ordeal, like whipping with knotted vines or exposure to the sting of ants. So far as I could discover, only the fresh cut vine is active. I found no way to dry, extract, or preserve the active principle. No tinctures proved active. The dried vine is completely inert. The pharmacology of yahe requires laboratory research, since the crude extract is such a powerful, hallucinating narcotic. Perhaps even more spectacular results could be obtained with synthetic variations. Certainly the matter warrants further research. I did not observe any ill effects that could be attributed to the use of yahe. The medicine men who use it continuously in line of duty seem to enjoy normal health. Tolerance is soon acquired so that one can drink the extract without nausea or other ill effect. Yahe is a unique narcotic. Yahe intoxication is in some respects similar to intoxication with hashish. In both instances, there is a shift of viewpoint, an extension of consciousness beyond ordinary experience. But yahe produces a deeper derangement of the senses with actual hallucinations. Blue flashes in front of the eyes is peculiar to yahe intoxication. There is a wide range of attitude in regard to yahe. Many Indians and most white users seem to regard it simply as another intoxicant like liquor. In other groups, it has ritual use and significance. Among the Jivaro, young men take yahe to contact the spirits of their ancestors and get a briefing for their future. It is used during initiations to anesthetize the initiates for painful ordeals. All medicine men use it in their practice to foretell the future, locate lost or stolen objects, name the perpetrator of a crime, or diagnose and treat illness. The alkaloid Banisteriopsis caapi was isolated in 1923 by Fisher Cardenas. He called the alkaloid telepathine, alternately banisterine. Rumpf, RUMF, showed that telepathine was identical with harmine, the alkaloid of Piganum hamala. Banisteriopsis caapi is evidently not habit-forming. Nutmeg. Convicts and sailors sometimes have recourse to nutmeg. About a tablespoon is swallowed with water. Results are vaguely similar to marijuana, with side effects of headache and nausea. Death would probably supervene before addiction, if such addiction is possible. I have only taken nutmeg once. There are a number of narcotics of the nutmeg family in use among the Indians of South America. They are usually administered by sniffing a dried powder of the plant. The medicine men take these noxious substances and go into convulsive states. Their twitchings and mutterings are thought to have prophetic significance. A friend of mine was violently sick for 3 days after experimenting with a drug of the nutmeg family in South America. Datura. Scopolamine. Morphine addicts are frequently poisoned by taking morphine in combination with scopolamine. I once obtained some ampules, each of which contained 1/6 grain of morphine and 1/100th grain of scopolamine. Thinking that 1/100th grain was a negligible quantity, I took 6 ampules in one injection. The result was a psychotic state lasting some hours, during which I was opportunely restrained by my long-suffering landlord. I remembered nothing the following day. Drugs of the Datura group are used by the Indians of South America and Mexico. Fatalities are said to be frequent. Scopolamine has been used by the Russians as a confession drug with dubious results. The subject may be willing to reveal his secrets, but quite unable to remember them. Often, cover story and secret information are inextricably garbled. I understand that mescaline has been very successful in extracting information from suspects. Morphine addiction is a metabolic illness brought about by the use of morphine. In my opinion, psychological treatment is not only useless, it is contraindicated. Statistically, the people who become addicted to morphine are those who have access to it. Doctors, nurses, anyone in contact with black market sources. In Persia, where opium is sold without control in opium shops, 70% of the adult population is addicted, so we should psychoanalyze several million Persians to find out what deep conflicts and anxieties have driven them to the use of opium. I think not. According to my experience, most addicts are not neurotic and do not need psychotherapy. Apomorphine treatment and access to apomorphine in the event of relapse would certainly give a higher percentage of permanent cures than any program of psychological rehabilitation. Rehabilitation.